and they'll take the guidance. They may not take my exact advice, but they're going to hear me out and they're going to take some steps to do something, to take some type of advanced movement forward so that they can better their situation or change the situation that they may not be happy in. So I'm looking for mentees that want to do something.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Bold Moves How Did You Know podcast, a podcast for the naturally curious who want to define their own path. I'm your host, Kristen Rocco, and here I'm sharing bold move stories that propelled my guests from curiosity to action. And in doing so, they've defined a path that is purposeful to them. Through these stories, I hope you'll be inspired to pursue your boldest dreams. Today, my guest is Natalie Greenwood. Natalie is a data governance and master data management thought leader. She's dedicated her 25-plus year career to helping clients across various industries implement data governance and master data management solutions that align with their data and analytics initiatives. She develops and executes strategies, policies, and frameworks that enable data quality, consistency, and reliability. She even holds a patent in data governance framework. She's also a board member at Texas A&M Texarkana. Natalie participated in the Harvard Business Analytics program, and she mentors over 30 people. Within the first 5 minutes of meeting you, Natalie, I can tell why you're a mentor to 30 people. You're so personable and relatable. So, hello, it's so good to have you on this show. Thank you for being here. And how are you?
Oh, I'm very good. Thank you for having me. And I am excited to be here on the show today.
Amazing. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. I would love for you to, help us get to know you behind the bio a little bit more and tell us how did you grow up? What does your life look like today? And what are some of the the experiences that influenced you up through now? I got this, we communicated through email a little bit, and I was really moved by something that you said. You said, I've made really good moves, really bad moves, some emotional moves, and some uninformed moves. So I would love for you to bring this to life a little bit more as well, because as you know, this is all about bold moves, right. But often to get to bold moves, we have to make some other moves.
That's right. So just to back up, I grew up in Michigan. I spent the first 40 years of my life there, born and raised. I moved around a lot as a child. My dad and mom were both in business, and my dad was in the telecom business, and he was responsible for a lot of different territories in the Michigan area. So we moved from the time I was in 7th grade until I ended up graduating as a junior in high school. We moved like 5 times. So I attended a lot of different schools. And I think in a lot of ways that influenced who I am as a person, because every time you move to a new school, you can imagine you have to integrate, you have to get to know new friends, you have to find a group, the right group for yourself, you have to figure out where you fit in. And so that kind of got me to where I'm at today, where I'm very comfortable in situations that others might not be, because I've been put into those situations over the years. There was actually someone asked me in high school, I think it was my sophomore year when I moved for the 4th time as a sophomore. And they said, oh, okay, so are you an Army brat? And I didn't know what they meant. I don't know what that means at the time. And I said, oh, well, my dad was in the Army and my sister thinks I'm a brat, so I guess, but I wasn't an Army brat. I was just, my dad was in business and telecom, and we moved around. So that's kind of how things got started for me in terms of just learning to be, having the ability to move into new areas and try new things without feeling, like I couldn't do it. I always went to these new schools with that open mind that I could do anything and I could meet anyone and I could be anyone I wanted to be. And so I kind of unstoppable from that perspective.
Oh, I love that. Unstoppable. And actually, I have to relate to you a little bit, because your story of moving around, I really relate to that. I got asked similar questions. I moved quite a bit in my childhood, and a lot of people asked me if my dad was in the Army or the military. But in fact, my dad worked for IBM. And at the time, the acronym also stood for I've been moved. So
well, yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But I agree that, moving around does shape who you are, and some of those qualities and characteristics that that may make you more adaptable, more flexible in different situations. So tell us a little bit more about that. What are some of these? I know you've, in addition to moving around a lot, you've also held a lot of roles, and you have really an unconventional maybe thought around the employee-employer relationship. Let's just put it that way.
I do. And so that comes back to how I grew up. So as we moved around, as I was seeing my dad go through all these job changes, or, it was with the same company, but he was moving up the corporate ladder, and I was being moved around as a child. I saw that my dad was being very loyal to a single company. And I was born and raised in the Midwest, where most folks are very loyal. I mean, this is automotive, this is automotive country. So there's a lot of folks that are part of the union, and they're going to stay in their role. The intent is to go to a company and stay there. And so I was raised with that, that mindset. But then I turned 16, and this is like such a pivotal moment in your life. I was getting ready for college. I was graduating early, and, I was all set up. My parents were financially ready to send me to college. And my dad was laid off after over 30 years with the same company, after all that he had done with this company, moving his family around, all the sacrifices he made, all the loyalty he gave to the company. He was laid off, and that layoff broke him. I mean, it was such a breakdown of our whole family at the time, because he was expecting this pension, and he was just 3 years away from getting a full pension. They took, so he does have a pension from the company, but it's much smaller,
Sure.
a quarter of what he was expecting. They took away that long-term healthcare, lifetime healthcare, and it just changed his whole trajectory at that point. And he was lost. He hadn't had to interview for a job in 30 years. So at 16, I'm watching my dad go to these workshops to learn how to interview again. And I'm seeing, my parents really buckle down on how they're spending. And they basically broke it to me that, we can't pay for your college. So that was like just so incredibly impactful at that age, when all of a sudden I need to get student loans. I have to kind of figure this out on my own. And that really drove the direction of my life in terms of the loyalty factor. So what my dad taught me after that, because my dad's been my mentor, my guide, throughout my entire career, what he taught me at that point was, I was loyal. I did all the things, and the business was loyal to me until they weren't. And so what he said after that, and how I followed the rest of his career after that, was he said, think of it more like a contract. Loyalty should not necessarily fit into a contractual agreement. It's a legal binding agreement. As an employee, I've said, I'm going to do this, and I'm agreeing to do these things. And as a business, you're agreeing to, set me up for success and provide me with all the tools so I can do those things. And as long as that's working, we're going to stay together. But if any of those start to break down, you have to make a decision, or the business has to make a decision. That's okay. Go ahead, make the decision. You leave, they leave, you move over, you move up, whatever needs to happen, but do something. And so that's why I get kind of a cringe factor when people say, well, I've been with the company 10 years and I feel this sense of loyalty. And I'm like, great, but what happens tomorrow if they have to let you go because things aren't working out on their end? Are you ready? Are you prepared? And that's why I'm always ready and prepared for what might need to come next.
All right, let's segue there because it feels supernatural. What do you do to prepare for your next opportunity so that you're not caught off guard?
Yep. Couple things. So I did start taking on mentees a few years ago. And I did that because it's a great way to network. It's an incredible way to network. It's also a great way to help other people who've been in the situation that my dad was in, and to help them like, hey, I know you feel comfortable now, but let's not get too comfortable. Let's be prepared. So by preparing them, I'm also taking the advice. And in preparation, it's, keep your resume updated, continue to network, know what's going on in the market, stay in touch with the people that leave the company, but also network internally. Ideally, if you're with a company, you want to stay with a company. It'd be great if you could stay and do more and do better and do great things within that organization because you're already there. So also continue to look internally, and just keep that concept of internal movement alive as well. But just always be ready, just in case. I just don't want anyone to wake up one morning, not have a job and go, wow, I didn't see that coming. Always just assume it could happen, hope for the best, expect the worst, and just be prepared.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I think it's funny because, obviously that happened to your dad many, many years ago at this point. And I was about to say that I think now companies are even more disloyal to their employees than they were then, which is making this conversation all the more important. I mean, it's always important, but definitely I think gig employees are becoming a bigger ordeal, and companies are a lot less tied to the
Right.
relationships that they build with the employees from the get-go.
I mean, there is the concept of at will now, right? So you have at will states, and that's essentially there is no real agreement. I mean, in the event that they want to let you go, if they don't like the color of your tie, they can let you go, and there's no recourse. It is what it is. So fine, okay, but then that conversation around loyalty changes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we left off where you were going into college with student loans, right?
Yep.
And so you're in this fascinating career and space of data governance. Is that where college started for you? How did you even find the space? How did you hone your interests? Because so much of making bold moves is really identifying what your vision is, right? And then being able to put some steps toward that. So how, and I think a lot of people may be searching for their vision, their interest. So what did that process look like for you, Natalie?
So again, my dad was my mentor. I grew up in telecom, and I was very fortunate because growing up, depending on what role he was in within this particular company, I was able to go and see some of the work he was doing, like take your daughter to work day was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to see all the techie stuff happening. I would get to go into the switch rooms where the telecom servers were hosted. And I just got to kind of, as a young child, see that. And then as I grew up, I started to see him in sales meetings and more of the, more executive leadership type thing. And I thought, this is cool. And he was also bringing home a lot of new tech because telecom was constantly changing in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. So, we were the first family to have in the state of Michigan a cell phone that was a bag phone for personal use. So I was just being exposed to all this new exciting technology, and it was fun. It was cool. His office was filled of computers and books. And there was this moment when I was in his office and he walked in one day. It was in the afternoon, and it was in the summer. And he said, "What are you reading?" And I said, "This book on COBOL. What is this? It looks like a foreign language." And he said, "Oh yeah, it's a computer language." And I was like, "Wow, this is so you can actually take this and do this thing, and these things come out." And he's like, "Yeah, do you want to try it?" And he was just fascinated that I was reading this book. And I said, "Well, yeah, for some reason I can't learn Spanish or French. That's not working. So maybe this will work because this is actually making sense to me." And so he was like, I think that might be where your career is going to take you. We started having those conversations. You might end up being, but he wasn't going to push me down the telecom path. He said, "You need to figure out what path's right for you." So I was introduced. He decided, "I think it's time to introduce you to this woman that I work with. Her name's Renee Barber, and she's a top sales leader in the telecom business. She works with me, and I think you should meet her. I think it's a time for you to see if maybe we can get you an unpaid, if you will, internship with AT&T. It was with AT&T at the time." And I thought, well, that sounds fun. So he did. He introduced me to Renee. And Renee, the first time I met her, so this is getting into where influence matters and mentorship matters. The first time I met her, she called me and said, "Show up on time. We're leaving at this time. Wear a suit." And I was like, okay. No, barely any introductions. I jump in her car. She takes me to a sales call. We walk into this room full of men, and everyone just stops talking. And she walks in and she does her sales pitch. And I could just see the room just like listening and hearing, and like the power, right, of this one person. They were all listening. It was a men at the same time. It was men back in the 90s, and they were listening to her. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be Renee. First of all, she's driving a nice car. She's respected. She's talking about things that interest me, which is technology. And so it was an influence. It was like that moment. I didn't think at that moment I wanted to do sales per se, but I wanted to be a leader, a thought leader, and someone who was respected. So that really drove my direction right out of the gate, even before I stepped on campus at Vera State.
So many things that you just said that I want to double back on. So I'm hearing that it's really important to have a mentor to help guide you, especially at an early age, but no matter the age, right? Because these people, I think your dad initially, and then Renee was able to open your eyes to a world that you didn't know about, right? And so that's what mentorship really is all about is exposure to new thinking, new ideas, new worlds, new opportunities. And so I guess that's what I'm kind of thinking is tip one is like find a mentor who can expose you to different areas that you may be interested in. The second thing then that I heard in between the lines is once you find something that you're interested in, don't ignore it.
Right.
Go more towards it. Right.
Even though
And
it wasn't perfectly aligned, it wasn't like I was going to be the next Renee, the next top salesperson, that it wasn't 100% aligned, but it gave me some direction.
Exactly.
And that's what I needed. That's what I needed at the time. And so I've just followed that. And ever since then, I've taken on mentees. I've got several mentors. I just think, and not just within my own company, but even external, because I want to get that feedback and that thought leadership from other people that aren't necessarily living the same day to day as me. Because you just, through a different lens, you see things differently. And, you know, a lot of times my mentees, a good example of why I think mentorship is also important is, you know, we can tell ourselves stories when we're at a company and we're going through something, and it might not be a great thing we're going through. Maybe it's an internal issue, or maybe it's a client that you're dealing with that's really difficult. You can start to tell yourself stories and get yourself pretty worked up, and you just kind of get lost in what's happening, and you can't see the bigger picture. And that's where, you know, your network really comes in, and being able to pick up the phone or text a friend and say, hey, we got to talk through this, and get that outsider's perspective. It's really going to help you grow. And it's also going to help kind of shut down that noise that is creating, you know, challenges for you in terms of moving forward and through the situation.
So through your mentor and mentee relationships, we don't always land on the right mentor first, right? What do you look like what do you look for in a mentor?
So for me, it's someone that I aspire to be like. Maybe it's a personality trait. Maybe it's the actual career path that they've gone down. Maybe it's the company they're at that I'm just interested in. Those are the types of people I'm looking for. Now, when I'm the mentor, the things I'm looking for in a mentee are people that are very driven. They want something. They might not know what it is, but they want something, and they're willing to ask for help. And they'll take the guidance. They may not take my exact advice, but they're going to hear me out, and they're going to take some steps to do something, to take some type of advanced movement forward so that they can better their situation or change the situation that they may not be happy in. So I'm looking for mentees that want to do something. And if I get a mentee and I start to sense that, you know, after a few calls, they're just complaining, they're not doing anything to change their situation, no matter what advice I give them, they're not taking any of it or even factoring it in. You know what, don't call me anymore, because this is a waste of my energy. I need people that are passionate and want to do things. And so I try as a mentee to my mentors, I try to bring that energy and make sure that, you know, if I'm taking any of their time, that's valuable time. I want them to get the most of it, and I want to get the most of it as well.
Yeah, what good advice. So you have this do something phrase that seems to be a really powerful phrase personally to you. Where did that come about, and how has it influenced some of the moves that you've made?
Yep. So people, I think I mentioned this to you before, but people have looked at my career, and some of them are scratching their heads. They're like, wow, you were with Ford a decade, and then you were with this company for like a year, and this company for 2 years, and this company for 6 months. And what's going on? Who are you, Natalie? What is your identity? And they question it. And my response to that is, look, if I'm at a company and I'm adding value and I'm doing all the things, and you know, I'm feeling good about it, they're feeling good about it, and it's a match, you've got me, I'm hooked. I'm giving you 150% and you're giving it back. We're in a good situation. If at any point something changes, the dynamic changes, maybe the leadership changes, maybe what I thought I was getting into wasn't at all what I was getting into, then I think you need to do something about that. Hence the advice I give to my mentees, right? So I'm in this situation. It doesn't feel right. Things are not going the way I would like them to go. It's impacting my personal life. I've tried all the things to make it work with the business that I'm currently with, and it's not working for whatever reason. So I'm going to do something, and I'm going to do the best I can to leave on the best of terms. First, I'm going to try to, find something internally so that, I don't have to move out of the company, maybe stay within the company. I'm going to start there. And that's what I tell my mentees always, if you can't make things work with your current situation for whatever the reason is, at least try to find something internally as long as you're happy with the company and the culture. If that doesn't work, then really it's to the benefit of you and the employer that you find something else. And I've actually coached people out of positions at companies that I've worked for that have been directly employed. I'm their boss, because it wasn't a fit and it wasn't working for them and it wasn't working for us. And there was no benefit in that to anybody. So I think that's where the do something came from there. I had this moment with one of my mentees where I just had thrown my hands in the air and I said, for the love of God, would you do something? You're driving me crazy. We're on our third call and you're telling me the same story. You've not had the meetings I suggested. You've not raised the situation with anyone that you need to. I'm starting to feel like you're just using me as someone to call and complain to. You know what? Call a friend, call someone else. But if you're not going to do something, then I can't continue to use my time. And that's where the do something started. And they kind of laughed at me and they joke with me. They text me, I'm doing something now. So it wasn't to be offensive or anything. It was just like, for the love of God, like you're unhappy and you're probably making your coworkers unhappy. And I don't think that's a good combination. So what can you do to change the situation? And then go do it.
What do you think holds people back from taking the advice, making the progress?
Fear.
Yeah, because it's funny to me, I'm just kind of processing all of that, and they've taken that initiative to reach out. They obviously want some guidance. So that is a big first step.
Yes.
But from there, they get blocked.
Yes.
So what is it?
It's fear.
What happened?
It's fear. Because what they have, and I do always ask this, like, let's think about the consequences. So I'm telling you should potentially do these things. What are the consequences? Let's think through how this might play out, what good or bad could come from it. And a lot of times the good or the bad comes with risk. And that is something they're not ready to take on because they may not have a backup plan. They may be responsible. They may be the sole breadwinner. I mean, I've been in that situation as a sole breadwinner where, boy, if I say something or do something that doesn't land well, I might be out of a job tomorrow versus giving myself some time to actually find the right thing. So I think fear is the thing. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about bold moves. It's, you're going to have to take on some risk if you're willing to do a bold move. There's just risk associated with it. And you just have to determine what level of risk you have an appetite for, and then you do it.
Do you have any guidance? I want to actually ask you first, and then also what your guidance might be for other people. But how do you assess the risk for your, from moving on from opportunities to continue making your bold moves?
Yeah.
And then what guidance might you have for other people? Because I see both sides of it, right? Like, it is very scary to quit a job without a net, right?
Yes. Yes.
So how do you coach people, and how do you think about assessing the risk before maybe taking a leap of faith?
So you always have to factor in your personal life, right? So, you have responsibilities to your family, or, to your creditors. You probably have a mortgage if you're working, if you have a house. So you have to think about that, how truly, if this advice, if I take it and it doesn't land well and I'm out of a job in a week, can I make my bills? So, obviously that's a factor, your personal side of it, but you also have to factor in your mental health. So if this position or situation that you're in is so bad that you can barely get up in the morning, or you're sitting in your car crying before you go into the office, how much longer can you withstand that, or should you withstand that just so that you can make your bills? I get it. You have creditors, you have responsibilities, but your mental health is really important too. So you have to factor that in. And sometimes the advice I give is, listen, if you don't have that safety net, but you're in this mental state that is not getting any better and it's not going to, it's time to reach out to friends and family and see if they can maybe support you in the short term to get you through this. Or maybe you need to sell your house, or you need to go move in with your parents, whatever it is. Think about all those things that you can do, because there's always a way. You can solve any problem if you dissect it enough and you think of all the different ways. There's always a way. So that's one of the things. The other thing you have to factor in is your reputation. So while it's all good and fine for me to be on this bold, moves podcast with you, talking about the bold moves I've made, there are reputational risks with starting with a company, especially a really big company, and then months into it deciding, holy crap, this is just not a fit for me. what do you do? That's horrific, right? Because people are going, wow, she works for the biggest company in the world and she's about to leave. What's wrong with her? And
Mm.
so you have to factor in how that's going to look, because that matters and it gets around. At the same time, though, if you can explain it and you can speak to why you made that change and why it didn't hurt that company and why, in fact, you probably did the company a favor and how it benefited you long term and your new employer, then I think it's okay. But you just have to be really careful, because there is a little bit of a dance you have to do there. You don't want to look like a total flake in the market.
Yeah, I remember in our correspondence that you had moved on from a role after 6 months. Is that right?
Absolutely did. Yeah. And it was a difficult choice to make, but at the same time, it was the only choice to make. I had made a decision to go into a company, and I spent 6 months there, and I knew probably within the first 20 days that it was the wrong place, but I was really trying everything to make it work for me. And it just wasn't. And it wasn't going to. And I thought, I'm giving 150%. The company's doing everything that they are expected to do, but we're still just not meeting in the middle. This work-life balance isn't there. The things they're asking me to do and needing me to do aren't things that I really even want to be doing going forward. And so we just needed to break up. But the intent is break up on a positive note, right? So have the conversation, man, do everything in your power to leave on a high note, give it 150% until your very last day. And then once you're gone, message things appropriately. There's no reason to badmouth a previous employer ever. Don't do that. It's not necessary. It didn't work out for you, but there's other people that are working there that are making money and relying on that business to be successful. So, just because it didn't work for you and it wasn't a fit for you doesn't mean it's not a good business that is doing good things for other people. So I think that's the other thing you have to factor in is just, always give it your all when you're there. And once you leave, just make the most out of it and have the most positive response you can to why you left.
Awesome. Really great advice. I love when you talked about you're a master problem solver, and as you were talking through that, I was thinking that, coming up with creative solutions to find how you're going to make something work is often what we need to do to move forward.
That's
right. The path isn't always clear, I guess, is what we're saying. Right. So what's the question? It's about becoming a problem solver. Okay, here's the question. Yep. How do you fine tune that muscle? Because it is a skill that can be learned, but I believe that you have to work pretty hard at it.
You do. And I'm an analyst, right? So my career, I started as a developer, which is a coder. And then I got more into the data analytics side of it, where you're taking the information, you're analyzing it. And to do that, you have to break it down and then build it back up to solve for the problem. And so that taught me early on how to solve for problems, just using that methodology and process. And so that's how I work through my own problems today. That's how I work with mentees, is I say, okay, let's go all the way back. I need to know as much details as I can to understand how you got into the situation you're in. I need to know all the players. I need the history. So let's factor in all of this information. Give me as much information as you can. Let's break it down, and then let's build it back up a couple different ways. And let's think about which one of those scenarios is going to play out best for you and your employer, because the last thing you want to do is screw your employer, right? No matter what, you want to leave on good terms. So in the event you're going to leave, or you're going to make a change internally, or frankly, you're just trying to solve for a problem so that you can stay at your company, you want to make sure you have all the information to do that in a way that's going to play out well. So I think it's just about breaking it down and building it back up and having the different scenarios. But at the end of the day, honestly, the decisions you make are only as good as the information you have at the time. So Kristen, that's one of the scenarios I ran into where I have made not so great moves because I didn't have all the information. I thought I did. I thought I went out and collected all the information and it made sense. And I went through the scenarios, I made a call, and it wasn't. It turns out I didn't, maybe do enough digging and I made the wrong call. That's going to happen. I think the intent is, when it happens, don't beat yourself up. You've made a mistake. You didn't have all the information. Okay, but how do you solve for that problem now? Then solve for that and move on and continue to make those bold moves. Don't let that stop you from making your next bold move. Just kind of step back and take stock of what's happened and try not to repeat that.
Yeah, You're making me think of, as I've got some years of my career now under my belt, what seemed to be big and significant when I was in my 20s and maybe early 30s, I've realized that it's not really as big or significant, as I've, had more career experiences. So, for example, if I made a mistake and it felt like in my 20s the world was crashing all over me,
Yes.
and I'm like, oh my gosh, Kristen, how could I have, for example, how could I have sent the email to the wrong client,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That could be a possible scenario. Now I just look so stupid. I look like I'm not managing the account the best way that I could. That would really throw me in a loop back in the day, But now if that happens, I reframe it so fast in my head to say, we're all human, we all make mistakes. It's going to be fine. And nobody's going to think about this as much as I'm thinking about this. They're going to be like, oh, whoops, Kristen made a mistake. She's got me the right information now. It's fine.
Yes.
Yes. So I think that's the benefit a little bit of going through some more experiences in your career too. You can realize that what might seem like huge problems previously are not really as big.
They're just not.
Scope.
And the reality is the people that, maybe got that email, they probably laughed about it, thought about it for a minute, and then moved on to their next big problem. And I think that's the other reason why mentorship's important. As part of mentorship, you're having conversations, and you're talking about, or I share kind of my bloopers reel, like, oh, here's something I did that was embarrassing, and they laugh about it, and I'm like, no, but really take that in, because when you make a mistake, I want you to think about what I just did, and then realize, you know what, I'm still in business, I'm still employed, I didn't get fired, it was embarrassing, but I moved on. I think the more you hear about what other people have done that was embarrassing or didn't work out the way they intended, the easier it is. It softens the blow when you make that mistake, because you will make a mistake. It's inevitable. We all do.
Yeah. It's inevitable. So now you've, as you said, you've spent 25 years in this space of data governance and become really the version of yourself that you had planned, right?
Yes.
So I would love to learn a little bit about that, just how you've been able to grow your career to where you thought you wanted to grow your career to, and then also what's next? I mean, what's your new dream? What are you working towards now?
Yeah, what a great question, because I am at that point in my career where my husband was actually just asking me this the other day. He said, Natalie, what's next for you? And I said, I don't know. I feel like I've checked off my bucket list. I've done all the things I wanted to do. What would be next? And so we kind of chatted a little bit about it. And he said, you always talked about executive leadership, being on boards. You're on a board now. He said, but what about still going down that path of executive leadership, sitting on a C-suite, maybe being part of a larger board for, a 500 company. And I said, yeah, that still very much resonates with me, because I want to break the glass ceiling. I want more women to have a seat at that table. And it just takes me back to that day when I saw Renee walk into this boardroom with all these men, sitting across, and they all just kind of stopped and listened to her. And I thought, you know what, maybe that's my full circle, is maybe that will be my moment when I can walk into the boardroom and I get a seat at the table, and, I'm able to be heard. So I think for me, that's like the end goal. And I still have, 15, 20 years to work. So I've got time to get there.
You said, I want to, sit on boards and become part of C-suite, because such an operative word, Natalie, because everybody has to have their reason for what they want to do. Doing it by itself is not going to motivate you, right? That's what I'm taking away from what you just said.
Right.
But putting because I want to break the glass ceiling, that's going to keep you going and into these bold moves that you need to keep. It's like straight path. Oh, pivot here, pivot here.
Right. And it's going to influence the other women in leadership that are seeing me, just like I saw Renee, that are seeing me do this. I want them to see this and go, oh, wait, she just, introduced me to this. I want to be her. I want to do that. So I want to be that influence for the next generation. And that's kind of where I think if I can end my career on that note, then I've done literally everything I set out to do, and I'll feel really good about my overall career.
Mm-hmm. And that is maybe the equation for satisfaction and fulfillment out of your career is knowing that you were intentional about what you wanted to do, you made it happen, and you can look back and be like, man, I worked my ass off.
Yes, I did.
And I did some really, I was able to achieve what I set out to achieve, and nothing got in my way. Coming back to your word, Natalie, unstoppable.
Unstoppable. Yeah. And that's how I've raised my son. He's 22 now. And I raised him as I was a single parent, and I raised him. I mean, I'm remarried, but as a stepdad, I truly did raise him, and I raised him to do the same, and the only way for me to raise someone and mentor them to do what I did is by actually doing it. So it's not enough to just say you're going to make a bold move. You have to be able to do that, and you have to put yourself in a situation where you can. And so hopefully he's proud of me, and hopefully he's seen that, but he's taken off in his career, and he's now doing all these crazy things at 22 that I just never in my wildest imagination thought he'd be able to do. And I like to think that that's because he watched his mom just be unstoppable. There was just, no matter what, it was like, I'm going to pick myself back up and I'm going to move on. I'm going to keep going.
We've talked a lot about bold moves from a career standpoint. And often I think that people relate to that a lot, right? I mean, career tends to be such a big focus, for people. It's their livelihood. It's how a lot of people find meaning and fulfillment. But what about bold moves in your personal life?
Yeah, so that's a very good point, because a lot of the reasons I work is so that I can afford the personal life that I have. Right. So live to work, don't work to live. With that being said, my goals and objectives from a personal level were, one, to raise my son to be the best possible human being he could be. So that was always something that just was, top of mind. Raising him as a single parent was something that I had to factor into my career path. There was a 2.5-year period where I was required to travel internationally to Malaysia, Japan, Poland, Austria, and I was gone 19 days a month for 2.5 years when he was very young. And so I had to make that decision from a personal perspective to bring in a nanny and, kind of put the trust in that individual. But long-term, I knew that it would benefit him and myself. So I had to do those things. So that was part of like that combination between personal life and work, and where do you meet in the middle. But personally, I've moved a few times, as as a young child, but also as an adult. So that was a few of the bold moves I've had to make, where I was living in a city that just wasn't working for me. I didn't love, it was Detroit. It was just crazy busy. There was a lot going on, and I didn't feel like I was getting enough time with my son because I was constantly commuting. And so I made this decision to just uproot my family and move to Grand Rapids, Michigan, the entire other side of the state, where things moved a little bit slower, but I would have more time at home. People thought I was absolutely crazy for doing that, but for me, it was the right move at the time. It was a personal move, but it also benefited me from a business perspective, because I was able to see new cultures, new environments that were happening in Grand Rapids that were very different from Detroit.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing those personal aspects too, because it all plays into the wholeness factor of getting you to achieve everything that you want to do, is not just the career standpoint, but all those personal little things that add up too. And interestingly, the point about moving around, that can also act a little bit as a mentor for you too. You start to see, as you said, different cultures. You're going to do different experiences, and those things are invaluable to better understanding yourself.
At 100%. And they also help you in business, because as a consultant, you are constantly being dropped into new environments, new industries, new states, right? New cities. And there are differences. There's cultural differences, there's, industry differences, and you have to figure them out very quickly. So having grown up in that situation where I was dropped into a new school and having to learn everything new, that really helped me when I was in business and as a consultant being dropped in, and you have to become the overnight expert of that business. But it also helped me with moving from, Detroit to Grand Rapids and eventually down to Tampa, because it's a whole different set of rules in every city. Things are just different. Things in Grand Rapids move very slowly. The pace of business is much slower than Detroit. And the expectations from my employer in Grand Rapids were, in fact, they actually said to me in a performance review, Natalie, you need to slow down. You're stressing us out. You want to do too many things too quickly and our business can't move this fast. And I was like, what? That's weird. Because in Detroit, if you weren't moving that quickly, you were going to be replaced. So it was like that reset in my mind of, oh, you know what? Factor in, read the room. It taught me to read the room, right? Like I'm pushing these people that do not want to be pushed. They're very happy at their pace. And I'm pushing them just because that's all I knew at the time. But once I learned that they didn't love that, I was able to pull back and go, oh, wait, no, read the room. I can slow down. So I think that also I gained a lot of experience just from that.
Do you have any practices that help you understand things, process things, so that you're able to learn from experiences and apply them the next time around? Like anything like journaling, I'm kind of thinking.
Yep, absolutely. So yes, I do quite a bit of journaling. But I also, I'm one of those people, I'm actually, believe it or not, most people don't realize this about me. I'm actually very introverted. So at work and, you know, my day to day, I'm very extroverted because this is what I love to do and it's exciting to me. But at home, I'm very introverted. So I spend a lot of time at home alone. And I think that's okay. I'm kind of thinking through my days and my weeks, and I'm constantly kind of evaluating, what have I done today that added value? What did I do last week that added value? And gut checking myself. And then I reset, because I think, and it's not, I mean, I'm not dwelling on these things, but I am constantly trying to be very aware of what value I'm adding to society, what I'm bringing to the business, what I'm bringing to the business world, and what I'm just doing in my personal life to help add value to the people around me. So I'm constantly kind of gut checking. Am I doing all the right things? Am I bringing value? And then resetting as needed.
Amazing. I want to ask you a final question, which is, what do you know about being bold today that you wish you would have known earlier on?
This goes back to exactly what you were just talking about. So my husband always says life has a way of working out. And we've been together now 10 years. And in the last 2 years, I've actually realized he's right. So I just wish I had realized that, 20 years ago, because it does. It just has a way. So even in those darkest moments, those embarrassing moments where you did something that is just totally cringeworthy, or you made a bad move or not the right move, man, it's okay. It's okay. Just, learn from it, and then come back and do the next bold thing, or the right thing that's, the thing that's right for you. But life has a way of working out, and it really does. It just does.
Yeah, it reminds me of the phrase, you just have to get back up on the horse.
Right. Yes. 100%. There's no giving up in my world. You get back up and you just keep moving. Head held high.
This conversation, I've learned so many things from you. It's been so insightful.
Good.
Thank you for being here, Natalie. If people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, on LinkedIn. Under Natalie Greenwood. Yep, absolutely. Find me on LinkedIn, connect with me. I love to interact with people and network. I would appreciate that.
Amazing. And for everyone else, hey, we really thank you for tuning into today's episode, and make sure that you subscribe to this podcast so you never miss another one, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.